The gentleman from New York reserves. The gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The chairman of the full committee is right. This legislation would, in fact, codify Obergefell. But what it would also do is reverse the law in 35 states where those states have said marriage should be traditional marriage. In fact, in 30 of those 35 states, the people of those respective states went to the ballot and voted for that. So let's be clear. He's right. It would codify what the court said in that decision, but it would undo what the people in the respective states, 35 states, either in 5 of those states through their elected representatives in the legislature, or in 30 of those states where the people went to the voting booth and voted, it would undo that. And with that, I reserve the balance of our time.
The gentleman from Ohio reserves. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
The Supreme Court in the Obergefell decision reversed the actions of the people in those 30 or 35 states. And with that, I yield 1 minute to the gentlelady from Texas, Ms. Escobar.
The gentlewoman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, once again, we've got to glimpse into the dark future Republicans have in store for Americans unless we stop them. The Republican-controlled Supreme Court hasn't just stripped women of the right to determine their own future by overturning Roe v. Wade, but Justice Clarence Thomas has invited attacks on access to contraception.
Welcome back to Conservative News, where we break down the issues that matter most to Americans. Today, we're diving into the ongoing debates over marriage legislation and how the left continues to distort the values many of us hold dear. Let's start with Congressman Jim Jordan's remarks. He made an important point when he said, and I quote, "This legislation would in fact codify and undo what the people in 35 states have already decided regarding traditional marriage. These states went to the ballot box and the people made their voices heard."
Private intimacy between adults and marriage equality. Last week, our House Democratic majority voted to codify Roe v. Wade, and this week, the House Democratic majority is here to defend your right to marry who you love. I rise in strong and urgent support of the Respect for Marriage Act. Republicans are intent on turning back the clock to create a group of second-class citizens with limited rights. When they say they want to send these issues back to the states, that's code for wanting to ensure that state legislative bodies can eradicate civil rights protections. If you think your hard-earned rights are protected, think again, because Republicans are coming for you. Democrats, however, are with you. To the American public, take note of our votes and who is with you and who is not. Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
The gentleman from New York reserves. The gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
Yeah, Mr. Speaker, we reserve.
The gentleman from Ohio reserves. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I now yield 1 minute to the distinguished Speaker of the House, the distinguished gentlelady from California, Ms. Pelosi.
The gentlelady is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm so honored to see you presiding on this very important legislation, and I thank the gentleman for yielding, and for the leadership of bringing this important legislation to the floor. Mr. Nadler has been in the lead on this for decades. Thank you, Mr. Nadler. I rise today in strong support for the Respect for Marriage Act, bipartisan and bicameral legislation to enshrine into law a fundamental freedom, the right to marry whomever you choose. As radical justices and right-wing politicians continue their assault on our basic rights, Democrats believe that the government has no place between you and the person you love. Let us salute the Judiciary Committee Chairman Jerry Nadler for his persistent leadership on this issue. It was 13 years ago Chairman Nadler, along then Representative, now Senator Tammy Baldwin, Senator Dianne Feinstein, and others introduced a bill by the same name to repeal the Defense of Marriage Act. Defense of marriage. Proposed by somebody who had been married 3 times. We don't know which marriage he was defending. And today, we will finally achieve that long-held goal. By the way, I don't care how many times somebody's married. I care about how they try to impose their hypocrisy on others. Thank you also to the Congressional LGBTQ Equality Caucus Chair David Cicilline and all of the members of the caucus for being tireless voices in the fight for full equality. Mr. Chairman, we're here because just 3 weeks ago, the Republican-controlled Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade, ripping away a woman's freedom over her most intimate health decisions. These radical justices took a wrecking ball to precedent of the court and privacy in the Constitution and placed even more of our cherished freedoms on the chopping block. Don't take it from me. Indeed, as Associate Justice Clarence Thomas declared in his concurrence, this is what he said. These are his words. In future cases, we should reconsider all of these courts' substantive due process precedents, including Griswold, Lawrence, and Obergefell, because any substantive due process decision is demonstrably erroneous. We have a duty to correct the error established by those precedents in total defiance of the precedents of the Supreme Court, in total defiance of what some of the candidates for justice on the Supreme Court testified that they supported precedent, and they voted against it. And now they want to go after other rights of privacy. Make no mistake, while his legal reasoning is twisted and unsound, it is crucial that we take Justice Thomas and the extremist movement behind him at their word. This is what they intend to do. Indeed, just yesterday, a Republican senator declared that the Obergefell decision was clearly wrong, plainly suggesting right-wing interest in taking aim at marriage equality. We must act now to defend same-sex and interracial marriage from the bigotry and extremism. In the wake of the Dobbs decision, with marriage rights now squarely in Republican crossfires, Democrats are ferociously fighting back. With a landmark Respect for Marriage Act, we ensure that marriage equality remains the law of the land now and for generations to come. Importantly, this legislation will repeal the unconstitutional and discriminatory Defense of Marriage Act. The Republicans knew that the Defense of Marriage Act was unconstitutional when they passed it. You know, I know that because shortly thereafter, they introduced a bill to make sure that the Defense of Marriage Act was not subjected to judicial review. Some of them proclaimed at that time that Marbury versus Madison, which established the principle of judicial review, was wrongly decided. And they wanted to rid the process of the judicial review from the...
But many Americans still believe marriage is between one man and one woman. He's absolutely right. This isn't just about marriage, it's about the federal government once again overriding the will of the people. The left talks a lot about democracy, but they seem to ignore it when the voters don't align with their agenda.
Defense of Marriage Act, recognizing, admitting that they knew it could not withstand judicial review. Okay, so while it was sent, the Defense of Marriage, to the dustbin of history with the United States versus Windsor and the Obergefell versus Hodges, our bill finally takes it off the books for good. That way, no future administration or majority in Congress can wield this appalling policy as a weapon against our LGBTQ loved ones. This legislation also guarantees that no married couple can be denied equal protection under federal law. This is really very important, from tax provisions to Social Security benefits and more, even if the court were to erase marriage freedom, God forbid. Finally, this legislation blocks states from denying recognition to valid out-of-state marriages, even if a state were to enact heinous restrictions. By passing the Respect for Marriage Act today, House Democrats, in a bipartisan, bicameral, and I salute you, Mr. Chairman, for that announcement that you made, take another step to defend freedom for the American people. Last week, our proud pro-choice, pro-women Democratic majority passed two major bills to restore and protect health freedom. Our Ensuring Women's Health Right to Reproductive Freedom Act will ensure that the fundamental right to travel and obtain needed health care remains in the hands of the American people, not in those of extreme right-wing politicians, which is future House Republicans' desire. Our Women's Health Protection Act will once again make the protections of Roe v. Wade the law of the land. And later this week, the House will pass the Right to Contraception Act, so that every couple may determine the size and timing of their families as protected by Griswold versus Connecticut. Not just couples, people. Contraception. Contraception. Can you believe they're going after contraception? We'll believe it because they have been going after contraception for decades in the Congress. And now, the Associate Justice has given us clear warning that this is in their sights. The contrast could not be clearer. While Democrats work to protect and expand freedom in our country, Republicans seek to punish and control our most intimate personal decisions. Mr. Speaker, it is outrageous and unconscionable that today a radical Republican Party seeks to wind back the clock on decades of hard-fought progress. As we pass this landmark legislation today, we salute the generations of activists and advocates, organizers and mobilizers who fought relentlessly to advance the all-American ideal of full equality for all. I say often that our inside maneuvering can just go so far. The outside mobilization produces the best possible results. Personally, it's with some emotion, and I think about my close friends, the iconic Phil Lyon and Del Martin of San Francisco. They were an inspiration to so many of us in San Francisco and in California, and indeed the country, teaching us that equality is not about tolerance. It's about respect. It's about taking pride. This bill makes crystal clear that every couple and their children, imagine if you're the children of a marriage equality or an interracial couple, and you see the Congress of the United States and the Supreme Court of the United States making an assault on your parents' marriage, how damaging that can be. This bill makes crystal clear.
On the other side of the aisle, Nancy Pelosi and Democrats are pushing this legislation as part of their broader effort to counter what they see as a conservative assault on rights. Pelosi praised the bill as a response to what she called radical justices and right-wing politicians. She claims the Respect for Marriage Act is necessary to protect freedoms. Americans deserve a government that respects states' rights, traditional values, and the will of the people. Democrats claim they're fighting for equality, but in reality, they're eroding the very foundation of democracy.
That every couple and their children has the fundamental freedom to take pride in their marriage and have their marriage respected under the law. With that, I urge a strong, hopefully strongly bipartisan vote for the Respected Marriage Act. Again, salute the chairman for his great work and yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman from New York reserves. The gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, the Speaker of the House just said, quote, Republicans knew Defense of Marriage Act was unconstitutional when they passed it. Did the 118 Democrats who voted for that legislation know the same thing? Did the President of the United States, President Clinton, when he signed it into law, did he know it was unconstitutional? I mean, I've heard some ridiculous things said on the House floor in my time here in the United States Congress, but that one was right up there. I would yield 2 minutes to my good friend from...
I thank the gentleman from Ohio. We've just been treated to a master class of misinformation. The Speaker also just said, can you believe they're going after contraception? Give me a break. She knows that's not true. There's not a single Republican even talking about that or any of these other categories of the law. This is designed to divide the country. This bill is a shameful effort at that. Mr. Nadler, when we were talking about our concerns about the care pregnancy centers being under assault, to make his case that pro-lifers are violent, he referenced the terrible murder of Mr. Slepian, an abortion provider, in 1998. That was a quarter century ago. We're talking about the last 11 weeks. We've had 50 care pregnancy centers vandalized, attacked, Molotov cocktails, spray painted, threats being made to Supreme Court justices. There's no equivocation here at all. Mr. Cohen implied that the conservative justices misled the Senate in their confirmation hearings. Look, we've got the receipts on that. It's demonstrably untrue. Justice Samuel Alito, who wrote the majority opinion in Dobbs, said that during the 2006 confirmation hearing, that Roe was, quote, an important precedent of the Supreme Court. It was decided in 1973, so it's been on the books for a long time, but he declined to call the ruling settled law. Justice Thomas, in 1991, in his hearings, he declined to comment on his views on Roe at all. He said, quote, I do not think that at this time I could maintain my impartiality as a member of the judiciary and comment on that specific case. Justice Gorsuch, 2017 confirmation hearings. He said Roe was, quote, a precedent of the Supreme Court. It was reaffirmed in Casey in 92 and in several other cases. So a good judge will consider it as precedent of the court, worthy of as treatment of a precedent like any other. However, he refused to signal how he would rule in future cases on abortion. Justice Kavanaugh, 2018 confirmation hearings, echoed Gorsuch by saying that Roe was an important precedent, but he indicated during his confirmation that he would be open to overturning settled law, including Roe, citing a long list of past Supreme Court justices. Justice Barrett, reserved. She was much more reserved on the Roe precedent. Another minute? In her confirmation hearings in 2020, she said this. She said she was committed to obeying, quote, all the rules of stare decisis, promising that, quote, if a question comes up before me about whether Casey or any other case should be overruled, that I will follow the law of stare decisis, applying it as a court is articulating it, applying all the factors, reliance, workability, being undermined by the later facts and law, just as all the standards. I promise to do that for any other issue that comes up. She said that she had to remain neutral on it as an umpire, as they all did. Look, the record is clear. The quotes are there. Anybody can Google this. What they're presenting here on this floor is not true. It is demonstrably untrue, and they're doing it for partisan purposes. Every time they talk, they reaffirm our position on that. I thank the gentleman for yielding.